So guys, I just finished out something that I think would be of benefit to Cubase users. Okay. So I'm a Cubase person, and it's actually doing a worship mix template for um Cubase door, and practically it's just entirely with Cubase stock plugins. Okay, so I do templates. Most of you know me. I do templates. I do templates designed to reference of particular specifics, depending on what the client wants. And there was this song I just finished doing. I think I made a before and after post of the song on Instagram, and I just thought about it. I was like, hey, I possibly can actually do something for Cubase users, and which will just be entirely with stock plugins. Now, the template is something that can be used for um, worship, CCM gospel, um, you know, practically Christian contemporary music. All right. And let me say this here. There are some persons who don't see, the need of using templates. I don't think that templates are bad, but it's the way you approach it. So the idea for my creating templates is just to put me at a particular point where I don't need to start to create things from or start to do stuff from scratch. Okay, it's already has put me on a, like maybe 70% point whereby most of the heavy lifting of what I want to do pertaining to that mix, eh, it has to do with the style or the on the genre, pertaining to whatever it is. The heavy lifting has been done. Then, um, with what is there, I can actually, tweak. And this is the same, I would say, for anybody who wants to use templates or possibly would want to get templates. I have a worship mix template, which I did practically with third party plugins. Okay, and it's there if you need that, you can just um, look at the description and click the link of the description. I'll leave the link of the description so that you can get the um a worship mix template for using third party mix. But let me just bring to our notice what I have here. So when I was done with this particular mix, I said, let me try out doing this mix again, just strictly with third party plugins. Just strictly with Cubase stock plugins. I've really not done that before. Okay, so I can tell you it was quite a bit of a stretch because there was quite a number of things that the third party plugins can do for me that I feel uh is going to narrow down my options, on what I would want to achieve. However, I think it came out well. Well, another thing that it forced me to do was to actually study more, uh, very much in context about the Cubase stock plugins. I know what they do, but I it made me to really go deep in comparison what this would achieve, how far this would achieve, what kind of move I can make with this plugin, in order to achieve something close to what the third party plugin would give to me. So I have the two mixes here. However, they are both mastered, okay, but the mastering, I did the mastering the same way. So I mastered the one I mixed for the third party plugin and the one I mixed with all Cubase stock plugins the same way, of which the mastering both involved third party plugins. But even at that, you would feel the difference and you would still hear what it sounds like. But I'm quite like saying, okay, for people who don't have, the funds and all that to want to be doing subscriptions on purchasing third party plugins, also for people who want to have a start with uh, Cubase stock plugins who are using Cubase, this can actually be very, very beneficial. So I'm going to play, you know, the mix. The mix with the third party plugins is this that's highlighted in green, and the mix with the Cubase stock plugin is this that is highlighted in pink. Okay, so I'm going to play both, bit of the sections, then do A B, then I go into the Cubase template routing, just show what's there, how I routed, and it's available, it's available. I'll leave the link, in the description. If you want this, you can have it and get started, using it as a Cubase user. All right, let's get into it. So let's play the mix for that's the mix I used third party plugins to work on. I put my faith in Jesus. He's my anchor to the ground. My hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. I put my faith in Jesus. He's my anchor. My hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. He'll never let me down. He's my anchor. Yes, my faith found people. He'll never let me down. He'll never let me down. He'll never let me down. Great is your faithfulness. Yes, He's faithful, God. Great is your faithfulness. From the rising sun to the setting, I'ma praise Your name in every season. Is Your faithfulness to me. Okay, so that's with the mix, you know, having with third party plugins. Let's play that with Cubase or stock plugins and get to hear what it sounds like. I put my faith in Jesus. He's my anchor to my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. I put my faith in Jesus. He's my anchor. My hope and firm foundation. He'll never Okay, so um now some of these differences came up. I can tell, what's causing the differences, what plugin, how some plugins affected, in the direction it affects because of the nature of the plugins. That's talking about Cubase stock plugins, and how, it may not be able to emulate the same thing with third party plugins. I know there's this hassle there, third party plugins are better, off than stock plugins. And this could be same with, anybody that's using any DAW. May not be necessarily Cubase, could be Logic, it could be Pro Tools, it could be Studio One. But I think personally feel that this is not bad. This is also cool, that can go out. And it just had to come up with different textures, especially, with the reverb choices, the saturation, because for like Cubase is only narrowed down to one saturation type, the tape saturation. Whereas when I'm working with third party plugins, I have variety of saturation plugins that I can use, on the vocals or on the drums, you know, compression and all that. But I'm narrowed to one particular type of saturation. Okay, so I'm going to play it in an A/B kind of way, and then I jump into um, the template. So with the third party plugins. He's my anchor to the ground. My hope and firm foundation. Let me down. Jesus. He's my anchor. My hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. He'll never let me Okay, so let's go into the template. So I have basically uh the percussions. Let's say if you have percussions routed to percussion bus, your kick in, kick out, with your kick samples, depending on the number of samples you want to route, down to the kick bus, then your snare top, snare bottom, your kick with your snare sample, sorry, to your snare bus. I'm using two snare verbs. Okay, I have a verb one. I'm sending two snare verbs to the snare. Then I have my tom one uh, with the tom samples routed to a tom one bus. Um, Now, if your drum kit is a 5-piece drum kit where you have the tom two, you can just simply duplicate what you have in tom one. All right. Then I have my floor tom, with the um, floor tom samples routed to the floor tom. Now, the tom one and the floor tom are all routed to a tom bus. Okay. Then you have the hi hats, you have the overheads routed to the overhead bus. Then, of course, you have my kick, my snare, my tones, and the overheads routed to a drum bus. Okay, routed to the drum bus. Um, then I have a drum verb being sent to the drum bus. I have drum parallel compression to the drum bus, drum saturation to the drum bus. So if I to just open my kick bus, this is what's going on for my kick bus. Having the frequency EQ, the vintage compressor, squasher, magneto, soft clipper. Now, like I said, the heavy lifting has been done. So, if you are working on songs like this or any song, you don't necessarily need to start again from scratch. All you just need to do, you are tweaking and you are close, you're already close to where you need to be. Okay. So for my snare, of course, I have something going on for the kick in, uh, for the kick in and kick out. Of course, I have my gates and my EQ. Same thing with my snare top, snare bottom. I have my gates and my EQ. Percussions, I have my EQ there. And I'm using like the stock Cubase stock plugin EQ. For the toms, tom one, uh, I have this is the Tom One Boss. So I have my EQ and I have my saturation. So like I said, Cubase just has only one saturation type. Okay, like a saturation plugin, which is this Magneto 2. Uh, uh, um, if you come down to my drum boss, um, practically I'm using the Cubase stock compressor, using the imager and the envelope shaper. For those of you who have seen some of my teachings, you know that I use that envelope shaper a lot, even when I'm working with third party plugins. Okay, so for my bass, yeah, I have this is what I worked with my bass, the saturation plugin, the vintage compressor, the squasher. This squasher happens to give me more bloom for the bass, which I would want to achieve with. If I'm using the third party plugin, I usually would use RBase. In fact, I start my plugin with the RBase, but in order to mirror what the RBase effect is like, something close to that, I had to start with the Magneto, then the Vintage compressor, then the Squasher. Then, of course, the CLA third party plugin, that has the chorus. Here at Cubase, I'm using the studio chorus for that. Okay, I'm using the studio chorus for that. Then I use Track Spacer for a third party plugin to do what I call a sidechain to the kick, but yeah, I'm doing it with the frequency EQ. So basically, it was a bit of a study for me to compare, and there were this close matching. So I have my acoustic guitars routed to an acoustic bus, where, of course, this is what's going on here. Okay, I have my EQ, my compressor, I have this quadriforce plugin uh, that I use to achieve what the Slate Revival plugin will do when I'm using third party plugin to want to give like a bright feel or airy feel to my acoustic guitar. Then, of course, I closed up with it with my Magneto saturation plugin. Then, for my acoustic plate verb, I'm using the Room Works. Okay, the Cubase Room Works here. So, like I said, every heavy lifting has been done. If you get this template, heavy lifting has been done. It's just for you to tweak. And also, I tell engineers, work in line with the reference that the client has given to you. Okay, try and work in line with the reference that the client has given to you, so that you don't go totally away from context. one of the basic things I usually would ask is that the client sends their what's it called? Sorry, let me turn this out. That the client sends their reference, okay, so that one is able to understand the field they are looking for. Okay. Um then let's I have my keys. Of course, my electric guitar, I have a delay, the Cubase delay, and I also have what verb did I use here? Sending. Okay, I use the revelation verb here, sent to the electric guitars. Um, then for my keys, practically all stock plugins. All right, all stock plugins. I have keys, left and right. Sorry, to a keys boss. You know, then organ. I think I have EQ and the tube compressor. I use the tube compressor here for the organ. Okay, I use the tube compressor here for the organ. This compressor is a very beautiful compressor. I don't know how many of us have used it, but this was actually my first time using it, like looking at it and using it, and it was able to do real good for me. Then so I have the organ, the electric guitars, the acoustic guitars, the keys. Then if you have aux keys, okay, all your auxiliary keys are supposed to fall into tracks. So depending on the number of aux keys you have, you can just duplicate the number of tracks, then it's routed to a bus, the track bus, where I have the frequency, the tube compressor, the stereo enhancer. Now this is actually left to um based on the field that you want to carve out here, okay, from your track bus. Okay. Then everything is now down. That's both the tracks, the organs, the keys, the electric guitars, and acoustic guitars is all routed to an instrument bus where I'm using the stock compressor to glue. Okay, I'm basically using the stock compressor to glue everything together. Then I have my lead vocal, is the lead vocal chain. Started with I have the gates here, depending on how the recording was done. If it was clean, you don't really much need the gates. But if it wasn't really clean, then you can dial in the gates. Then you have the DSR. I pretty much liked what this vocal compressor did. It kind of gave me the feel that the Arrowvox, the waves Arrowvox would do. Okay. So then one beautiful thing about Cubase have, or rather has, the Putec EQ. So I just mirrored what I did, with that. So beautiful. So that's like my lead vocal chain. Then my BGV's vocal chain, almost the same thing with what I have with the lead vocal chain. I think maybe just one or two differences. If not, I think it's the same thing. Then I have my room. That's the room mics captured, where I just have the frequency and the compressor, which is really squashing things here. I think I had someone ask about how to treat room mics. Um, then I have the vocal plates that I'm sending to both the lead vocal and the BGV vocals. The BGVs rather, and I'm using the reference here for that. This is where I would say the stock the stock um, verbs and the third party verbs, the stock verbs doesn't really catch that space that I was looking for, but so good. It's still good. There's still a way to manipulate it, but it still gave me something that I really love. Pendy, there's a way you can dial it, gives you that feel. The Vox verb sent to the BGVs, I use the revelation BGVs and the lead vocal. Okay. Then I have the ping pong, you know, sent to the BGVs, slapback delay sent to the lead vocal where I was using the stereo delay here. Um, then vocal parallel compression. I'm using the vintage compressor that's sending to the vocals. Now, this is sending to a vocal bus where my lead and the BGVs is routed to. And in this vocal bus, I have the tube compressor that I used in gluing the lead vocal and the BGVs. Then I also had the magneto saturate. So the heavy lifting, like I said, has been done. Then what else here? What else here? I think that's that. And the focus area. Then my sub mix, I had just the compressor and the magneto. So because of the space, I just did something which uh it's just based on discretion and what you want to get out of the feel of the mix. I did a verb sub mix verb where I did an FX channel and put on Revelation and did a send to the mix. Now, you have to be careful on how you are doing this so you don't get to muddy everything and spoil, the mix. And just put a little bit of send room here to just give that bit of space, to the entire mix. So, and I think it's cool. It's cool. So, if you're an engineer, like you're using Cubase and you want something really good from the stock plugins, I can, you know, guarantee and advise that this is something that you should get to, do mixes for clients. You can get this done, in the GFIF, work speedily, work smart. If it's even something where you're doing broadcast mix, this is also cool. So this is this with the stock plugin. Let me just play with the stock plugin how it sounds. Okay, so let me A B. Okay, so I'm going to leave in the description both um, mix templates, with third-party plugins, and also the mix templates, with all Cubase stock plugins. Like I said, for Cubase users who are dealing into this mixing of the styles, this is really good. I think this is really good. You can actually work with this. All right. Thank you so much. God bless.